Welcome, everybody, to our first, post All-Star break, a podcast on the Blue Jay Center podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. I'm along with Robin Solomon and Cole Whiston. We got a lot of things to discuss, fellas, from the All-Star game to the draft to this Tiger series. And then, hey, anything else we want to fire at each other? We got it covered. Let's get this thing rolling, baby.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Blue Jays Center.
Bautista drives it deep left field. Gone!
The sickest Toronto Blue Jays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
All right, fellas, let's get the least sexy thing out of the way right away. And that is the Jays losing 2-3 to the Tigers, boys. Let's get after it. I mean, hey, the only positive is George Springer. That's about all I got for you. Rob, take us away, pal. Your thoughts in this 3-game set.
Fitting that we're going to Rob, who is the sole reason why we lose any series to the Tigers.
Yeah.
That's correct, yeah. Although I will announce I was not at any of the games this weekend, so I cannot acquire any blame for this, so I'm completely blameless in this aspect. First of all, guys, so nice to be back. It's been a while since we've done a show. Yeah. Obviously, me and Pricey were out on the West Coast, and then the All-Star break gave us an excuse to take our own All-Star break from watching the Blue Jays, but we're back in business with the Jays losing series and playing bad baseball. Once again, losing to the Detroit Tigers. As we all know, though, at this point in time, the wins and losses no longer matter. It's all about the narratives. And while the games weren't compelling in themselves, watching the Blue Jays starting pitching in this series, Yusei Kikuchi, Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, I know it was an opposite order, but regardless, all those guys are legitimate trade candidates that we've talked about that could potentially be moved. And obviously, if you're watching, their performance was number one at the forefront. And we mentioned our post-game show today. While all of them had their moments in their starts, respectively, that look good, overall, the stat lines, the pitching lines don't look as pretty as the eye test would tell you, especially with Yusei Kikuchi. That was the biggest story for me yesterday. Cruising through 5 innings, 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 8 punch-outs, and completely the walls closed in on him, just like they did his last start in Arizona a week ago. And Trevor Richards comes in and it didn't get a whole lot better from there. So that was tough. I think overall, though, you did see some good things from all 3 of those guys in their starts. And I think that's going to be the major narrative to look forward to, how those 3 guys specifically look going forward from now until the trade deadline in a week and change.
It's pretty remarkable, guys. Before you
no, you're good.
It seems like at least Kikuchi and Gausman were having great starts. One swing of the bat killed their day. It seemed to be the case.
Yeah. No, and we mentioned on the show earlier this afternoon, Kikuchi's kryptonite last year was not seeing the 6th inning. His kryptonite this year is seeing it. And that's a point in favor of the Jays analytical team. But as Rob said, it doesn't take away necessarily from his trade value, especially given his attributes. If he was a righty, maybe we would have a different conversation, but because he's a hard-throwing lefty, that matters significantly more to a contending team for the back end of a rotation. So I think for Kikuchi, as long as he doesn't absolutely fall off a cliff in his next start, I think the Jays will have no problem dealing him, no problem getting a reasonable return back to him or back for him that we are happy about. Kevin Gausman, as we all know, it doesn't look like, maybe it's smoke and mirrors, but it doesn't look like the Jays are looking to trade him. And then Chris Bassett, obviously, there hasn't really been any conversation regarding him getting traded. And if you're not going to trade Gausman, then you're definitely not trading Bassett. But yeah, like Rob said, this is what the Jays fans should be watching. If you're going to take the time to spend 2.5 hours every day to watch this team, it's focus on those things. Focus on, guys that are likely to get traded, guys that you might think might be on this team next year, i.e. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and George Springer. Yeah. Springer has been on an absolute tear, and maybe to the point where he has convinced other teams to take a shot even at that price. Which is the one thing that we talked about ad nauseum that was the hindering side of George Springer going to another team. It wasn't, whether or not George Springer, had anything left in the tank. It was, he doesn't have anything left in the tank at $20 million. But all of a sudden...
25.
Right, 25. All of a sudden, you look at the raw numbers across the season, you go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe he does, and then you look at the last month. If he can continue this for the next 15 games, whatever it is until the deadline, I think we will actually be having conversations and hearing his name in trade rumors. I do believe that, because I think the Jays can admit to themselves that there's no reason to take that chance on him next year, especially when you want to cut payroll. So you have more room to spend in next year's offseason. And then if you're the other team, like, of course you would want a proven postseason asset going into the playoffs. So I hope that he continues this hot streak, and that is something that's actually exciting to watch for Jays fans. Like, cheer on George Springer, because that is probably the biggest piece that a month ago was the least likeliest to be traded.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go back to the pitching before I touch on George Springer. I really want to get to that. Look, people love looking at stat lines. Like you mentioned, Rob, about people see the stat line for Kuchar, like, oh, trade value down the tube, it's curtains on him, done. We're getting some like no-name 35th ranked prospect in an organization. It's over. It's done. No. You know why? Because there were probably scouts all over Rogers Center this weekend, not just for the Jays. You look at a guy like Jack Flaherty, who was going up against Kikuchi in game one. Exactly. He's the guy in the same spot. Right. So it's a situation where there's scouts everywhere, and the scouts aren't going to go back to the team and say, well, this is a stat line. No. They're going to say his first 5 were electric. And in the playoffs, you don't need your starter going 6, 7, 8 innings of work. You need to give him 5 great innings and then see you later. Let's not get too active about Barrios.
Or how about 3 1/3? Yeah, I was
going to say. Yeah, it's still fresh. I don't know. Regardless of that, it didn't tank his stuff. I thought he looked awesome, like you said, through 5. And that's what they got to take back to whatever scouts were there. On the George Springer stuff, I think after today, I think it's a 711 OPS, which is crazy. Like, this dude had like a 530 OPS, one of the worst qualified hitters in baseball, and all of a sudden he was
the worst at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It had to have been. Yeah,
it probably was. And the fact that he's come back and now able to hit a fastball, I think that's the big thing. The fact that he's able to hit a fastball is just changing everything. You look at all the home runs he's hitting.
Funny how that works. Funny how that works. Imagine being able to hit the guys that are going to hit the number 1 pitch in baseball.
Yes.
Isn't that shocking?
That would be helpful.
Everybody, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But it's beautiful to see, isn't it, boys? Like, we were watching this downward spiral, and we're like, we're gonna have to sit on this contract for 3 years at a dude who's probably gonna be one of like some Chris Davis type stuff. We're gonna have to watch this sort of play. Nah, I'm good. And the fact that he's brought it back to not just respectable, like he's an average hitter now at this rate. He's second on the team in home runs. He surpassed Dalton Varsho by 2 bombs now at this point. He's sitting at 13. He's only 3 behind Vlad. Like, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep. We got more coming on him later for Stat Genius.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can feast all over that. All right, fellas. Well, let's keep this thing rolling, because we got a lot of things we want to talk about. Unless you want to keep going with this. Is there anybody else you want to talk about? Actually, no, screw it.
Bichette. I do feel like we should talk about, but before we talk about Vlad's awesome series. I mean, obviously the 2 big games on Friday and Saturday with the bombs, and even today, I do think that his first few at bats were a little frustrating. I thought he got some really good pitches to hit from Montero of the Tigers, and then obviously kind of made up for it a little bit with that double down the line late in the game there. But overall, Vlad's been awesome, and I mean, coming into this season, not in the season, after this game. An OPS and I think 136 coming into today. OPS plus 136. His highest OPS, raw OPS, since 2021. And if you look at the overall numbers now, I mean, he's having just a very good season. Like, we talked about it all season long, how much better he's gotten. And we're going to talk about it a little later. I do think, by proxy from the Bichette conversation of who do you sign, and I think it's becoming more and more clear that the Blue Jays should try to lock up Vlad Guerrero Jr. as soon as possible.
Yeah, let's get to that. Unless you want to touch on that, Cole.
I think that the Vlad conversation, deserves its own show. Maybe at the end of the season when it is curtains for everything else we need to watch on, and as the conversation obviously grows going into the next offseason. So I think we'll save a lot of that for the end. Most of the people that will watch this show and watch Blue Jay Center know where we kind of stand on Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but yeah, I think I don't think we need to touch on it anymore. I think, Rob, for today, good point.
Now let's get to the Bo stuff, because, boy, it's just getting just crazier and crazier. I mean, we're not hearing stuff that we haven't heard already, but it's just more and more and more, right? We heard earlier in the season, basically, the conversation with Hazel May kind of started everything, where he was like, he'd welcome a deal outside of Toronto, and like, oh, okay, there goes that. And then when we talked about probably the last show where it was, the San Francisco guy, and we're like, oh, okay, so that's a thing. And then he gets hurt, and he comes back after the All-Star break, and look at that first game, calf strain again. He's gone in the 10-day IL. It's going to be multiple weeks. It's ugly stuff. Then we get the article from Bob Nightingale, and this is the quote from the article. Toronto Blue Jays shortstop Bo Bichette has told friends that he would welcome a trade, while first baseman Vladimir Guerrero Jr. badly wants to stay in Toronto and is open to signing a long-term extension. Like, I got a question for you guys. With Bo now out multiple weeks, and we are almost in August at this point, does Bo Bichette play another game with the Toronto Blue Jays? Like, this is kind of where I'm at here. It's kind of crazy to think about, because if he's out multiple weeks and it's a calf strain, you never know how that thing's going to react. He might not be back till September. And at that rate, God, things are getting wild here near the end. Cole, we'll start with you, pal.
Yeah. So I think that if Rob comes on there and goes against what I'm about to say, with any definitive conclusion that saying no, that he doesn't play another game, I think that is crazy to say today. I think that'll be nuts if anybody thinks that Bo Bichette's played his last game as a Blue Jay. But I will say this. Bo Bichette has definitely taken on the role this year of this year's trade deadline the guy to watch at the deadline. Like he is that guy this year. There's always one guy that all in likelihood will walk out of the deadline on the same team that he was on previous to the deadline, but he gets talked about ad nauseum about maybe get traded because he's a star, right? So that's Bo Bichette this year. None of us anticipate him getting dealt at this deadline, and obviously the injury certainly doesn't help that. So I definitely would say with 99.9% confidence, Bo Bichette has not played his last game as a Toronto Blue Jay. But I guess crazier things have happened. Rob,
risky question. What do you think, Rob?
I would say it's in play. I mean, obviously, there's no definitive statements.
Hold on, but put a percentage on it before we go any further.
Put a percentage on it. I would still say it's unlikely. I would still quantify it as unlikely. I still think he does play another game as a Blue Jay, but I don't think it's inconceivable. And the reason why is because, obviously, logically from what you're saying, look, his trade value's in the gutter. We know he's not going to get traded at this deadline, regardless if he was healthy or not. They just can't afford to sell him off at his lowest stock. And, out a couple of weeks, there's still 2 months into the season, so there's still a conceivable way that he's back at some point in August, September, whenever that is. But my question is essentially, I mean, he's out multiple weeks. At this point, the Jays are definitely out of it. They're already out of it as it is, but at this point, why not just give them a reset, let the young guys play? They've already been playing, but regardless,
send him home.
Essentially, send him home. I mean, I would think Bo's a competitive enough guy where he wouldn't accept that, despite how unhappy he is. But let's say that does happen, which again, unlikely. He goes into the offseason. The Blue Jays want to contend. At this point, they're just saying to themselves, "Look, I mean, we're not going to pay him yet." For whatever reason, it's very clear that he's not entirely happy here. I mean, we mentioned there were rumblings and thoughts, but at that point, wouldn't you want to get ahead of the curve rather than bring him back in an unhappy situation in next year's season, and then have him struggle again and then do this?
So I have a question. And it segues perfectly off of that, and I don't know where I stand on this either. How much worse do we think the Bo Bichette situation could get? And what's I guess the better question to simplify it is, what's the risk reward with Bo Bichette in 2024? Is there enough of a reward to having him come back and possibly find it and have a hot September like he's had previous years? Or does the risk of him coming back and just being this bad or being worse and even more checked out, or whatever the on-field shenanigans goes on with him for the next whatever it is, 70 games, 60 games, do we think that outweighs the possible reward? Do we think there's any trade value to be lost/had with the next 60 games?
I don't think so.
Okay, so you think that regardless of how this season was to end, even if it's on a hot Bo Bichette streak or a very bad Bo Bichette streak, his trade value will remain the same in next year's offseason?
Look, let's be honest though. He's already been that bad. He's already got an OPS in the 500s. I mean, I don't want to say it can't get much worse because statistically it could, I guess.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
But it just can't, right?
Yeah.
He comes back and goes,
Logistically, yeah.
Exactly.
one for every day. It'll probably somehow find a way to go up, right? And it's just
Yeah,
it can't get it can't get worse than this. So
Yeah, I was gonna say his trade value is already like first percentile in my opinion. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned there, it
So
could
then
always be
why?
worse.
So then if that's the case, why wouldn't you bring him back?
No, I mean, I would bring him back. First of all, let me
Okay.
just say, but by me saying it's in play, I'm putting out the possibility exists that I didn't think existed. I don't know, a week ago, 2 days ago, whatever. I still expect him to play, whether it's this year or at some point, maybe even next year. You know, I think the odds of him never playing another game for the Jays again are slim. I do think that it's now. It was a 0% chance a week ago. I would say it's I don't know, a 10% chance now. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, I think at this point, like you mentioned, Pricey, it's you could always be 0 for the next at bat and the next at bat, but it's hard to envision a scenario where Bichette with an OPS that starts with a 5 in late July, heading into the last week of July, could get any worse. I mean, at this point, I mean, aside from some like off-field issue where it really tanks his trade value to the point where he's untradeable, I don't envision a scenario where at this point it's lower than it. It can't get lower.
also his trade value. I mean, I wouldn't really test it to his play, like to certain things. Also, the amount of soft tissue injuries that he's now succumbed over the last calendar year now at this point.
Yeah.
Right. The injury last year, I think it was against Baltimore. I put him out for a majority of that.
Around this time, yeah. It was around the trade deadline,
around this time last year. And then obviously I think this is his second calf strain this season, right? He just re-aggravates it and it's just no good. So it's a lot of soft tissue stuff we've all watched sports enough to know that stuff is a pain in the ass to go away. Look at Springer's first year with the Blue Jays, right? Where he tried to get rid of things and it was a pain in the rear. He comes back and hits great, but couldn't stay on the field.
Tough to go away and a tough sell.
Exactly. So that's why deadline, it's not happening. In the offseason, it's going to be interesting because we don't know like the amount of things we've heard about Bo Bichette wanting to leave tells me that he just really doesn't want to be here anymore. And that could be attributing to his play. So if that's the case, teams know what healthy and happy Bo Bichette is. Mm-hmm. And it's what we've seen the last, 4 or 5 years now. I mean, you don't all of a sudden forget how to hit.
Yeah, but this screws us. It screws us so bad, him being this bad this year and having the body language that he has, because not only sure, that teams will maybe throw this year out the window. There's a lot of teams that won't. There's a lot of teams that won't throw out this year and look at it like, oh, so if he is unhappy or we're playing poorly for a year, or we don't meet expectations for a year, like he's gonna be like this. Like this is.
I think once he has a massive contract and he's got all the money, I think he'll be fine. Or
the opposite, or Javier Baez.
Well, that's the thing. You don't know. Yeah, that's keep
it on brand for the show today after the Tiger series.
Yeah, that was.
Let me ask you guys a question. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, we're saying season ends. Blue Jays are having conversations with teams in the offseason. They're saying, look, hey, Bo Bichette, we know. Look at the baseball reference page. He's been a great player for the first 5 seasons of his career. This was an outlier season. He was
better than Vlad. Over his career per at bat, he's better WAR per at bat than Vlad does.
Right. So this season, it's an outlier year. He was unhappy. Obviously, dealt with some injuries. It was just a tough year. We talked to him. We said that, hey, Bo, we're gonna try to send you where you want to be next year. He's gonna be very happy. He's gonna be willing to play for y'all. You have that scenario, or you have scenario B where you're gonna try to compete and you bring him back. And let's say he's just as unhappy as he is now. He has another rough year. Do you think that? I mean, I would say definitively yes, but I want to know what you guys say. Do you think that would hurt his trade value if he has another year?
Oh yeah,
where it's like this. I mean, I feel like it's a harder sell at next year's deadline. Yeah. If he has a bad year, I think that's why I think there's a bit of a risk now.
That's why
going into next season, not trading him.
That's why I brought up the question of does he play his last game, because I don't think he makes it to next year, regardless of how he does this end of the season. If he does play again with this team, I just don't think he does. With all the stuff that's come out and him not wanting to be here anymore, and it's very evident to literally every fan in this city, and every media personnel, and God, probably the players even know it at this point. What would bringing him back do for us? Like, sure. It would do absolutely nothing. Now,
well, you trying to compete? That would be the logic.
The logic, yeah. If the issue that I think the Blue Jays have, and obviously that James is referring to, is the fact that he has 1 foot out the door, which is the problem. So it's like, yes, on paper, you bring that guy back. That guy on paper, of course, come on.
Yeah.
It was one bad year, but the Bichette that we see today, like, this is, humans, and unfortunately, he has 1 foot out the door, and I think that that's not a recipe for success coming into next year unless, you have a nice couple dinners in the off season with him where, the vibes change. But I think he's I think if we don't trade him this offseason, he probably gets either walks for free or gets traded for free at the and next year's deadline. I think that is like, of course that's a yes. Yeah.
So at this point, it seems as though, like, and obviously we can revise our opinion with more data, but it seems as of this moment right now, the consensus is that we all believe that Bichette, they should hold on to him at this deadline, try to recoup any value that he has left remaining this season if he comes back from this injury, and then obviously try to move him the deadline ahead of next season. I think that's where we kind of all stand.
Move him before opening day. That's what I'm saying. He does not play a game for the Toronto Blue Jays in the year of 2025. That's what if you trade him any time after that, I think you've lost value. I think you want him at a full open market value. That's it. In the offseason, where teams are trying to paint a picture for their team in 2025, you need to know that you need to have that done before opening day.
Also, I think we can probably wrap it up with this. Is like another reason you want to do it in the offseason. There's a lot more players. There's a lot more teams who think like, hey, next year we're going to be good. We're going to be in it. And they'll be willing to make a move for Bichette, exactly. Instead of going into next year and then you've cut your teams probably in half and the value's not as high, regardless of how he plays.
Yeah.
So the offseason, I would be absolutely baffled at this point if he plays a game in 2025.
Yeah,
and
that's
it would be a failure.
I want to make it clear again, just to finish things off.
Yep.
Even if Bichette was to play out of his mind for the first 80 games of 2025 with the Toronto Blue Jays, I still think his value in that offseason is higher than what it would be at that deadline.
Yep.
Easily.
With more teams, More teams,
absolutely. More teams, a full season of work to do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And then he's a rental player otherwise, right? So there's a lot less time to try and persuade him to stay. So it's
not to mention too, I think the most important thing of it all is that you trade him early in the offseason, for example. That's now multiple months before the season even starts, where that team can have legitimate contract negotiations with him about an extension. Whereas you trade him halfway through the year, you don't really have time to sit there and discuss a contract. You're probably in the middle of a pennant race.
You don't want to.
And at that point, he'll have to hit the market as a free agent. So I would definitely agree that trading him in the offseason as opposed to next year's trade deadline would be the right call.
Now, I knew that was going to be a big topic. It's been busy.
Time on it, which was great. So I do think it's big news.
Oh, it is. And so let's rip through this other stuff. Let's start with the draft, because that was a positive thing that happened in Jays land. It hasn't been much this year, but with the MLB draft happening, the Toronto Blue Jays selected 11 pitchers out of the 21 guys that they drafted. Now, their first round draft pick, Trey Savage, was apparently the Jays were quite shocked and ecstatic about getting Trey Savage at the 20th overall. But where have we heard that before?
Yeah,
Austin Barnes, everyone's so jacked up.
Okay, but that was legit. I didn't look at this year's 2024 like draft rankings going into it. But the Austin Martin thing was legit. He was projected to go top 3, and we got him at 5. So that's
the point I'm trying to make. Is he's supposed to go top 3 and whatnot. Falls to Jays at what was like 5 or 6 or whatever it ended up being. We're all crapping ourselves like, oh my God, we got the next dude. Meanwhile, he's just like a 4th outfielder in Minnesota and has no power. So we're here,
But point in favor of Ross, he got off it early, and
exactly he did. Now, Trey Savage, at least according to the prospect ranking on MLB.com, was ranked 11th. And on a lot of different draft boards, he was in the top 10, no doubt. So the fact that he dropped all the way to 20 was quite crazy. He has, I think, a 4-pitch arsenal, all above average pitching. He's 6'4", 225. He had a 2.02 ERA, which was 4th in D1. So like all of D1. Had 145 strikeouts in like 96 innings, which is
hello.
Quite a bit, boys. And a batting average against, which was 2nd in all of D1, $154 against.
Wow.
So he dominated college ball.
What's the kicker?
He's a pitcher in the Jays organization, buddy. I think that's right there. But I don't know. On paper, looks great. I think the whole talk is that he will not be pitching at all the rest of the season because he pitched the whole college year. And I think again, that's what the talk was, at least listen to podcasts and whatnot. Doesn't seem like he's going to pitch at all this season for the in the minor leagues. But hey, positive sign. Get some new young guys. Add some spark to the farm a little bit. Like I mentioned, 11 different pitchers.
No, this matters. This is so for anybody that's unaware of the turn and the tide of MLB draft prospects.
Oh yeah,
going after guys that are coming out of a college rather than coming out of high school, which was the traditional method, probably even 10 years ago, allows you to have guys like now. This happens every once in a while, every 5 years, every 10 years. You get Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens is a guy that won the national title and within a year, obviously, makes the All-Star team the next year and is a very formidable pitcher in the major leagues. That is where baseball is heading now when it comes to especially pitching prospects, because getting controllable guys, getting controllable rotations that are cheap is the much better way of winning and winning consistently than what the Jays have tried to do with their rotation, because they couldn't produce those guys out of the draft, which was pay for their rotation, which is the majority of their payroll in 2024. So Trey Savage, I believe, is a guy coming out of college.
Yeah,
exactly.
Out of East Carolina. Yeah. So he was great for them. Now, going through the rest of the guys in the second round, they drafted Cal Steven out of Mississippi State. And their first high school pick was a lefty, Johnny King out of Naples, third round pick there. And Sean Keys, a third baseman, that was their fourth round pick out of Bucknell. And then they had an extra fourth round pick where they drafted outfielder Nick Mitchell out of Indiana. And people are going to probably wonder how the hell did they get an extra fourth round pick? Obviously, 20 rounds in the draft, they had 21 picks. Well, that fourth round pick was acquired by the Giants signing Matt Chapman. That was the whole reason they got that extra pick. So Nick Mitchell, we all kind of attested Nate Pearson for us getting rid of Edwin Encarnacion. Yeah. So that was that whole deal. Nick Mitchell, bud. Matt Chapman's your comp, buddy. Here you go. No, I'm kidding. There's no pressure on him for that. But I mean, look, we all have watched this Jays organization the last few years and having zero to no pitching. Actually, that is zero pitching depth. Okay. And for them to go out there and take 11 pitchers out of 21 guys was needed. I still don't like that Ross Atkins is making all these things happen, but regardless, well, it wasn't really him. It's
again, it's more than it's way more than him. Yeah,
exactly. Well, John Farrell's son is the scouting director. So
Shane Farrell, I believe that's his name.
Yeah, Shane Farrell. Yeah, so it's quite interesting that's the whole full circle. Maybe that's his dream job. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but this is definitely a nod to the attempt to compete in 2025, and I assume even partially there's a percentage out there for the front office to look towards 2026. Obviously things need to go right, Vlad, for that to happen. But this is the method. It is getting controllable rotation and cheap.
Absolutely.
Here are my thoughts on the whole draft thing. I mean, there's two voices in my head. The first voice is, look, I mean, I'm not a draft expert. I've never watched college baseball. I mean, hearing Trey Savage was like a top 10, 11 pick in that range and getting him at 20, based on all the experts say, that appears to be good value. And most importantly, he didn't fall. It seems like because of any material issues, he fell kind of because of the signing bonus dispute. So the fact that the Jays were willing to give him the signing bonus he wanted, I mean, that is a good thing. That's a thumbs up to the organization for that, getting good value at that spot. On the other hand, it's two things. It's the MLB draft and it's the Blue Jays drafting. Two things that typically don't go all that great. The Blue Jays, we hear about their draft history and how many guys they just haven't been able to, all their first round picks that have been accounting to nothing in the big leagues. And while that may be true, I think the Blue Jays are, relatively one of the worst teams when it comes to drafting. But all across every team, you look at their last 10 first-round picks, you'll see a ton of busts. I mean, across all organizations. And that's just what the MLB draft is. You just don't know what you're going to get. There is no Victor Wembanyama. There's no, Trevor Lawrence or all that stuff that you see in other leagues of guys who are basically sure thing, can't misses. So you're really at the mercy of a lot when it comes to baseball. And a big part of that is because guys have to go through a couple of years in the minors before they even sniff pitching. I mean, not everyone's Paul Skeens where it's like a calendar year.
Oh, yeah, very few.
In the big leagues. Yeah. Well, I mean, literally nobody, right? I'm not sure. I mean,
he was the fastest to ever make the All-Star team. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're at the mercy of a lot, but I would say on the surface, based on what the experts say, they seem to give it a pretty good nod of approval. So, you feel pretty good about it, I would say.
Yeah. And with him not pitching at all this year, I wouldn't be shocked if I don't know if they want to do it this way, but where he starts next year, he could be Double-A.
Oh yeah, Yeah, I mean,
he's a seasoned pitcher. Yeah. So
it'll in all likelihood be double A, but at worst it'll be like 3 starts in A. Like it'd be like 3 starts to make sure you still got it, and then quickly move up. And like this is for anybody that doesn't remember, this is what Alek Manoah was. Alek Manoah got up to the majors very quickly because he was coming out of college. So this is the exact same formula, and expect the same thing from Savage as long as he performs, obviously.
Yeah. All right.
Before we finish things off, I do want to shout out my guy, former teammate of mine, just finished his college career at OSU, the Oregon State Beavers, and it's the first guy that I have any knowledge of being friends with that has been drafted professionally in any sports league. Micah McDowell got drafted by the Marlins in the 17th round in this year's draft. So I'm ecstatic for him. I said from the get-go that he was the best baseball player I've ever played on the field with. Obviously, we don't know, being from Nova Scotia, what that's going to turn out to be, but I said to a lot of people that would listen that I think he's got a shot. He had a tough college career. And finally this year, everything clicked. Obviously, none of us really knew in terms of my friends and stuff that if he was going to get drafted, and he did. So shout out to him. First professional player that I actually have an acquaintance and actually have a relationship with. So shout out to him.
Well, congrats to him. That's and going to the Marlins. That's to be pretty cool. Yeah. He has a shot getting up there because boy, they ain't any good. So hopefully he gets a shot. That'd be cool. That'd be really, really cool to see. All right, let's keep this thing on the rails and keep this thing rolling. All-star stuff. It's usually positives. It's usually happiness. Well, Jays fans get stabbed in the gut.
Yeah.
With Eric Swanson being a Blue Jay and Teoscar Hernandez hitting bombs in LA, and then they're like, "Oh, go to the All-Star game, and then go play in the Derby, and then win the freaking Derby, and have Vladdy wearing his Blue Jay jersey." You're like, "Oh, just twist the damn thing more."
Yeah.
Holy crap. I know we're supposed to say and be like, "Oh, so happy for Teo." And look, I love the guy.
Yeah.
But as a fan of this team, and everyone listen to podcasts, I'm talking to the Jays logo. Yeah, it sucks, man. Like this organization's probably punching themselves more. Like it's All-Star weekend.
There was no other way for that All-Star break to go for us Jays fans other than that way. Like other than Teoscar having the season he's having in Los Angeles and then getting picked for the All-Star team, then getting sent to the home run derby. Like there was no other way for that to happen, and for him to win it was hilarious. And like Vegas, like there was no narrative in the Vegas odds. He was like plus 1,000 to win the whole thing. But us Jays fans should have taken a sprinkle on that, including myself, who didn't do that.
Yeah, and just an extra little stab and just an extra wound. And Shohei goes deep and 3-run shot in the All-Star game, and you're like, "Oh, of course, right? This is great. It's fantastic." Rob, what are your thoughts, buddy? This is bad.
The anthem was interesting at the home run derby.
Buddy.
Yeah, just to steer away from the actual games and stuff, because we all know Teo and Shohei Ohtani, 2 guys who Blue Jays fans, of course, the last 2 winners specifically, myself.
Wanted him on the team, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No,
this year?
This year. It was just really tough to see. And what's been just like really, really rough 2024 for this team. I mean, just by proxy, that it could not have gone worse in terms of that. Teo, like you mentioned, I'll always love Teo. The time he had with this team was special. He was on some really special teams in 21 and 22. But unfortunately now in LA, hitting bombs and winning the Derby, that's tough. That's tough to reconcile. And I feel you, Pricey. I really do.
Yeah.
It sucks, boys. It absolutely stinks. I don't think there's anything else to touch on. I just wanted to bring it up because
that's it. Yeah, Vladdy played, started, and nearly grounded into a double play, which was
shocker.
Shocker. Yeah.
It's been God. Like this 2024 year for this organization has been flat out miserable, right? Or I guess not. Would it be 24 as a whole? Maybe not.
It would be.
Regardless, this calendar year. Hey, if you want to go from All-Star break to the last All-Star break, it's been miserable.
Luckily, it was also announced in the last week that Looney Dog will be back next year along with the schedule release. So we haven't canceled that yet. So get your Looney Dog
to get people there. Because
I was going to say they might have to do a few Looney Dogs for the postmortem that Rogers Center is going to be in 2025.
Might be a ghost town, boys. All right, let's. You guys got Stat Genius cooked. So let's see what we got.
All right, back to Stat Genius. I'll start off. I should have done a little bit more research before presenting this to you guys, but I can't remember who exactly released the poll. But the MLB released a poll of all 30 teams about how much of last year's payroll was allocated. Sorry, how much of last year's revenue was allocated into this season's payroll. And your Toronto Blue Jays, our Toronto Blue Jays, came in second with around 74% of last year's payroll, last year's revenue going to payroll. So basically, an indication that despite a lot of rumblings out there among Blue Jays Twitter, among Blue Jays fandom, that this team doesn't spend the front office. Sorry, not the front office. The ownership is cheap. Not the case. I mean, they have spent a lot. They run a nominal payroll that's top 10 in all of baseball, and obviously this specific number, second in all of baseball. I think behind the Mets only among teams that allocated last year's revenue into payroll. So I just want to point it out there. I know we give ownership a hard time, but this is not on them. This what has happened this season. And really, why this core hasn't been able to get over the top and win a playoff game in the last few years, it's hard to really blame the front office.
The owners, yeah.
I'm mumbling my words right now. The ownership for it. Rogers, yes.
Yeah, we can have.
Rob, if you want to tell us that front office aren't to blame, you'll have pitchforks outside.
Yeah, no. Basically, by proxy, by me saying ownership is not to blame, I am by proxy saying that the front office and the decision making with the allocation of those resources is 100% to blame.
Right, exactly. I was just going to say we can have a full conversation about the allocation of those resources being an issue, but the willingness to spend isn't. You could argue that with Rogers being one of the richest owner in baseball, you could argue that sure they spend the majority of their revenue that they make from the Toronto Blue Jays on the Toronto Blue Jays, and they don't spend outside of that. You could argue that you could sprinkle a little bit outside of the revenue portions, but when you see the number like that, second in all of baseball, it's hard to put any blame on Rogers. So yeah, that was me. We can give credit to it later on, maybe. But yeah, I was the one that sent it into our group chat.
I completely missed that. I found that out on a separate occasion. Yeah, my bad. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, I sent that into Blue Jay Center group chat I think it was a week ago. Anyways, my stat genius is also quick, and it is George Springer, and it's really just a shout out to the guy, but with a little funny tidbit at the end. So George Springer over the last since June 21st has an over 970 OPS. Coming in today, it was like 963. I think that obviously with the 2 home runs and the double, that it has to be above 970 at the minimum.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is if you extend from June 21st to June 1st, the OPS goes 200 points lower. So that 3-week stretch in the beginning of June was so bad to the point where it would have like if he wasn't so hot right now, over the last month and a half, it would only be with like a 750 OPS. So I thought that was funny because that is the season that is George Springer in 2024. He was abysmal, and now he is so hot that you could just extend anything, just the sample size, an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, an extra 3 weeks, and all of a sudden you're looking at a more normal version of what we gotten from George Springer this year. But shout out to the guy; he's hot right now. We talked about at the beginning of the show, so I just wanted to put some numbers behind it.
Give me the reverse match.
I would say, yeah, exactly. Reverse match in the sense of like getting off to a rough start and turning it around. It's a good one there. I would say it's pretty wild to see like that much of a change, but at the same time, it does kind of make sense with the law of averages. I mean, that's really the only way is a drastic uptick in production when you go from the worst qualified hitter to now with like probably like an above. I mean, probably pretty significantly above average hitter. I mean, a 710 OPS and. Ever since Rob Manfred decided that, offense is no longer fun, we like pitching and World Series matchups that no one cares about. Ever since that brand of baseball came into play, a 710 OPS is really good. So, yeah.
A year ago.
What's that?
It's been 1 year in terms of that specific brand of baseball.
Yeah, it's been heading in that trajectory for a while now. But, yes, this has gone over the top. But yeah, regardless, anyway. Shout out to George Springer, now an above league average hitter after we thought that they should just send him home and give him his paycheck and say, but take care, buddy.
Take care, brush your hair, Rob. That's it. But all right, so that's enough on the Rob Manfred talk. That's all we need for today, boys. We didn't need to talk about that guy more often. Let's get to the farm because with the draft happening, let's see what's happened with the guys that are already on the farm. So the miserable stuff at the top of the the top prospect for Jay's organization continues, as Ricky Tiedemann is set to get a second opinion. So that.
Should we rewind 2 months ago when we heard the second opinion talk with Alec Manoah and run that same show, run that same clip?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can probably do some math in our head if Ricky Tiedemann comes back and it's like, oh, he needs to have this nifty looking surgery. He's probably done for the rest of the season and probably at this point all of next year.
Oh yeah, if he gets another surgery, he's done for next year for sure.
So
Yeah.
lovely stuff there. And
he was just to put it, to spell it out for people. He was 100% at the beginning of this offseason, a thought process for contending in 2025 for the Toronto Blue Jays. I can guarantee you that he was expected to at least have a look going into 2025 so
he was going to make his debut this year. Yeah,
so the fact that that's not happening could very much change the way that the Jays approach next year's offseason.
But I'm at the point now where Ricky Tiedemann is entering the Nate Pearson conversation for me. Where if you get anything out of him, it would be good, right? He's sitting right now and he's pitched 3 years in the organization. He's pitched a total of 140 innings in 3 years. You go back to you do the last 2 years because he pitched 78 in his first freaking season. That's over half of that.
Yeah.
You go to his last 2 years, he's pitched a combined, quick math here, like 61 innings in 2 years.
Yeah, you don't see it very often with guys like him in terms of, and this is maybe even a meaningless conversation, but like, what does a guy like that hold on the trade market? You know what I mean? Like, what does a guy that's dealt with some injury problems, but obviously shows a lot of promise when he's healthy? What does a guy like that show for trade value? When who do you give him to? Do you give him to teams that have a depleted farm system? And then even if you do, what are you getting back for them? Are you getting back a fringe MLB guy, maybe a bottom tier everyday starter? Like that, you don't see those trades very often, and that's where my mind went in discussing the future of Ricky Tiedemann.
I mean, fortunately, I would say fortunately, but also unfortunately for the Blue Jays, they're in a position where they should not be trading top prospects, regardless of their standing, because of how their farm system looks. So, fortunately for them, it doesn't look like they'll have to deal with that issue of what value Ricky Tiedemann would have on the trade market. But I will say, Bryson, I know I was tongue in cheek when I said this, but I'm sure you would trade him for Bretton Doyle right now if you had the option.
We don't need Brett. We got the Bart show, buddy. See that cat? Yeah, we don't need Bretton Doyle. Come on, buddy.
Okay, Bretton Doyle would be pretty fucking good.
He would be great.
Yeah. Yes, he is a new Colorado Rocky that we're talking about. That is basically the joke that Rob is making. But regardless, he has been fantastic this year. And if this guy exists in the future, then 100% he'd be good on any team.
Yeah, he definitely is. All right, let's get a couple positives in here before we move on to the deadline talk. Arjun Namala, I mean, I've seen a few things from him now. There's a lot of strikeouts in A-ball. However, who cares? This Jays organization is like, oh, good back-to-ball skills. Oh, but he doesn't strike out at all. But he got zero pop. He's going to hit one home run this year, but he's only going to strike out half the games, right? 162 games. He'll only strike out 81 times, but he'll have like 2 bombs for you and have a 650 OPS. Good for him. No, Arjun Namala is striking out a ton. I think he's like 65 strikeouts in 45 games or something, so it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't care. 236 average in his last 10 games. I could care less. 371 on base. They love that.
That's really good.
Slug in his last 10 games. He has 4 home runs, 9 RBIs. He's walked 12 times. So the numbers have really come up for him over his last 10 games, kind of after that developmental stint that he had. He's really swinging the bat better. Hit a home run today even. So that's a good sign for him moving forward. And the guy that we joked about a couple podcasts ago, Fernando Perez, the 23rd ranked prospect in the organization, the 20-year-old kid. And we're all like, dude, we're at this point where we're talking about a guy in the 23rd, right? Yeah. Well, not only is ZRA like less than 3.5 in A-ball at 20 years old, and he's been awesome. He was the Jays' lone player in the All-Star Futures game. And I didn't realize it. So he was the only guy who pitched. He threw a 3-up-3-down inning, no problem for the 20-year-old guy from Nicaragua. And it was a tryout 2 years ago on some small field in Nicaragua. That's how he became a Toronto Blue Jay.
I was going to say James is just trying to justify bringing him up 2 weeks ago, but no, I think this is justified.
And I didn't realize this until the Jays tweeted it out. Shout out to them. So far in his minor league career, he's thrown an immaculate inning and a no-hitter. So,
Wow.
20-year-old kid, in A-ball. So he's been pretty good. Again, what does it mean moving forward? Who knows? It's a prospect, a 20-year-old kid in A-ball, but hey, got to grab some freaking positive out of this farm system somehow.
Yep. No, that's good. Good,
yeah.
good on you, James. That was good.
There we go. All right, boys. Well, let's get to we're not going to go too heavy into it because we have, I think if we do a Thursday and a Sunday show, we have 2 podcasts before the trade deadline. I don't know if we'll do that. Regardless, we'll at least have one where we can go deep dive into trade deadline talk.
Oh, yeah.
The trade deadline is Tuesday, the 30th. So we got some time to do it, but let's briefly get into some trade deadline discussions, boys, because we're all over the place, right? A week or two ago, we hear, they're only trading guys with one rental dudes. Well, then we hear, hey, they're open to trading guys with some term to them. So we're like, okay, well, what the hell are we doing here? And I think for me, it's a simple one. But for me, it'll show a lot about this, competing in 2025 mindset if Chad Green gets traded. I mean, he's been awesome. He's been really an inning 2/3 of nothing today just to save you a 5-4 game against the Tigers. But you did it. If you move on from him, that's a dude at a low cost. He's on your team for next year. And if you go on and deal him, you're showing me that you are not trying to be serious next year. Right.
Yeah,
and it's a simple move. It's not like you're going to ask from some dude's top 10 prospect or anything like that. But even if you move on from him, regardless of the return, it'll show me where they go for 2025. That's just my little thought on that.
Unless they get a 2-time Silver Slugger in the deal.
I mean, hey, bring it over. Because Russ ain't going to make that trade. Gotta have good bat to ball skills, boys. Come on.
Maybe a 1-time Silver Slugger.
Didn't they trade for Teo as well? Didn't they trade for Teoscar as well?
Chad Green?
No. Like Ross and this management team, they acquired Teoscar Hernandez, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yep.
Yeah, so no back to ball skills, just a lot of bombs, and they flipped.
Yeah, they didn't like him. They didn't like him. See, they traded him for a fucking no leverage reliever.
Francisco
Buffalo Bison's reliever.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think my line of demarcation. What's up?
He's on the team right now.
Yeah, you're right. You got his recall. Yeah, congrats, Eric Swanson. And then the my line of demarcation that you mentioned, Chad Green being it. To me, I think it's got to be one of the controllable arms, one of the pitchers, one of the starters. Sure. And I've shifted my position. I think the last time I was on this podcast, I'm not sure if I mentioned on this podcast or on one of the shows, but I did say that not Kikuchi, because Kikuchi's getting traded regardless. Gausman or Bassett, that you have to trade one of the two. I've shifted my stance. I think that it's got to be Kevin Gausman because at this point, holding on to Chris Bassett, I don't think it deflates his value in any way. I think that the same move you can make for Chris Bassett at this deadline, you could do it again in the offseason. And I do think also that I think Chris Bassett is one of the few rare guys that would have more value in an offseason setting rather than a sprint to the postseason, simply because he's a guy that you can have him, middle to back into your rotation. He'll give you 180 to 190 innings. A lot of he's the opposite of Yusei Kikuchi in terms of Yusei Kikuchi is short quantity, but a lot of quality, whereas Chris Bassett is the quantity. He'll give you a ton of innings. He's a great guy. He'll stay healthy over 162 games. Whereas Kevin Gausman, he's a guy that you can go in there and he'll be a number 2 for a team tomorrow. There are a lot of postseason teams that would have Kevin Gausman pitching in their postseason rotations. I think that's the guy that would have more value. The swing and miss element. Kevin Gausman's been one of the best strikeout pitchers in all of baseball the last few years. Even this year, a down year. His case for 9, still right around 9, still very solid. So I think that's a guy that the Blue Jays, if they're smart, they would get ahead of the curve and trade him before his value declines even more. It's obvious that he's no longer the same pitcher that he was last year, just by his age. That's a trend that you can expect to continue. And I think, to me, I've shifted my focus. I think the Blue Jays trading Kevin Gausman, that would be a successful offseason for me. And obviously, trading Kevin Gausman for value. You know what I mean? I don't mean just getting him off the team, but regardless, I think that if you want to have a serious shot at contending next year, the pathway is shedding payroll with guys with value. I think Kevin Gausman is at the top of the list. And then going out there and trying the Robbie Ray, Steven Matz thing again, signing a couple guys to, short-term, prove-it deals and turning them to good value. That's what the Jays did when they built their rotation in 21, and it ended up very good. Will you get a Cy Young Award winner and another solid pitcher? Very unlikely. Very unlikely, but you can still get 2 solid guys for value and then use those other resources to allocate the roster. Because as it currently stands, just trading away the expirings, there's no way you can compete in 2025 running the same payroll if that's all you're doing is just trimming the fat off the roster. You have to make a deep cut. I think Kevin Gausman is the deep cut.
Yeah, I agree. And Kevin Gosman's it. We mentioned multiple times throughout the show, George Springer's the other it. If you can get off both of those contracts going into 2025, all of a sudden there's a serious conversation to be had regarding who you can pay in 2025 offseason. And we'll start the conversation right now. We talked about it in the chat today, so we might as well drop our thought process going forward in 2025 behind cutting payroll. It's signing Juan Soto. If Juan Soto hits the open market, that is the guy who you go after. Same exact approach that you took to Shohei Ohtani, you take to Juan Soto. Because that's probably one of 3 guys in the league, and I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, and Aaron Judge, who you do that for. Juan Soto is a guy who, surprisingly to everybody, is, I believe, the same age as Vladimir Guerrero Jr., except just 10 times the player that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is, and also hits from the left side and can play in the outfield. So you go after Juan Soto, and in doing so, you have to cut the payroll that Rob is talking about, but that's also a guy that not only gives you an absolute chance of competing in 2025, even if you ride out the contract of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bichette in that year, and you don't sign him to an extension, and you just try to contend for 2025, and you lost them both for free in the offseason, you have one fucking Soto on your team. So if that guy hits the open...
That's a new window. A new
exactly. A new window is exactly where I was going with that. So that is the thought process that we have here behind cutting the payroll. It's if Juan Soto hits the open market, which it, by all accounts looks like he's going to, despite playing with the Yankees for a year is going to be a hurdle for us to get over. But the Yankees are also strapped for cash. They're running one of the highest payrolls in baseball, and their window, I wouldn't say it's closing, but it's certainly not opening, even with Juan Soto on your team. So there's a lot of dead cash on that team as well. So it's not impossible. It is not unlikely after what we saw this year in the offseason with Shohei Ohtani. I hope Rogers and the front office, whoever that is in 2025, realizes that Juan Soto is one of the guys that you can go after at the same level that you went for Shohei Ohtani. So, I agree.
I have a take. And right now, look, all the fans within the Blue Jays stratosphere, they're all very upset at the idea of the Jays contending in 2025. They're saying, well, how the hell is that going to happen? How the hell can you possibly field the contender running this same payroll if all you're going to do is trade the expiring contracts, like I mentioned? And then all of a sudden, you have to think about it from Ross Atkins' point of view. This is a guy who is trying to save his job. And could you imagine walking to your boss's office? Let's say, I don't know, you work for whatever company. Your boss, you give them a business idea 3 years ago. They spent a ton of money into that idea. And then after 3 years, you're like, you know what, boss? You spent a lot of money. Let's scrap that. Let's start over. Your boss would be furious. Your boss would be furious, and he would show you the door. So Ross Atkins, by going in there and saying, look, Rogers, my plan is to start a new contention window. Let's cut the payroll. Let's take a year to step back, and let's start a new contention window. Rogers is going to say, and Mark Shapiro should say, well, Ross, we are going to start a new window, but you're not going to be the one that's going to be calling the shots around here. Yeah. However, if Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro can pitch to Rogers, look, let's just write the season off for what it is. It's a disaster. Our playoff odds are minuscule if it even exists. Let's just cut the payroll this year, and then we're going to make a serious push to acquire the one guy who you can this offseason within a transaction that doesn't include giving up the farm system that you don't have that can change the trajectory of this team next year, and that's Juan Soto, like you mentioned. I think, I don't know about you guys, I still live in a world where I find it hard to believe that the Blue Jays can go head-to-head in a bidding war with the Yankees and win. Mm-hmm. But like you mentioned, Cole, they went head-to-head with the Dodgers last year, and damn near were, by all accounts, right there until the very end. They looked very probable that Shohei Ohtani was going to be a Blue Jay at some point. So I think, to me, that would be the way Ross Atkins actually continues his tenure as a general manager. Not that I think it's much of a shot to begin with, but I think if he can pitch to Rogers, let's cut payroll and go after Juan Soto, I think that's his pathway to being the general manager and staying within the organization beyond 2024.
And that starts at this deadline. If you can, you pitch that to Rogers at this deadline, saying, watch what I do at this deadline, and that's you have to prove it with the trades that you make and selling off your contracts that are going to make this move possible in 2025. You do that by succeeding in all of your trades and closing deals and getting the returns that you were looking for at market value. And then it involves convincing Juan Soto that Toronto's a better fit than New York.
Boys, that would be something wild, because we're at the point where we're ready to reset and rebuild. And we're ready. Like, the pitchforks I talked about outside Rob's place, yeah, it's at Rogers Center ready to take down Ross Atkins. But the temperature of Jays fans on Ross Atkins would flip on a dime if he was able to sign Juan freaking Soto. Like, it was the same thing with Shohei Ohtani, right? It's like we all wanted Ross gone this offseason. We all heard all the end of season stuff with all them pointing fingers at each other, and we're all like, what the hell are we doing here? Why is this guy still around? And then the whole Shohei Ohtani stuff happened. If he landed Shohei, the tenure would be goddamn different with Ross and the
it wouldn't even be a conversation. It wouldn't even be a conversation.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to get at. So if you add Juan Soto,
build a statue of Ross Atkins outside Rogers Center. Yeah. That's what that would have been.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, they'd have the extra money to do so it'd be that. But yeah, you bring in a Juan Soto. I mean, not only for Jays fans would you love it because it's Juan Soto, and it like you mentioned, guys, it extends the window by quite a large margin. It then tells players that you're going to be competitive and they might want to stick around. Maybe Bichette would wake his ass up a little bit and be like, oh, maybe I want to stay around here. But regardless of that, anyways, enough of that. It would also put a knife somewhere else into Yankee fans' guts.
Yeah.
And, are you kidding me that Juan Soto leaves the Bronx to go to the Jays? Oh, man.
Yeah.
That would do something crazy for Jays fans. So it would do a lot. Do I see it happening? No. But I would love to see it.
Yeah, I think that previous to 2024, I would have never even brought this conversation up. Yeah. But after what we saw in 2024 in that offseason going after Ohtani, I think that at least showed me that everybody that is part of that decision-making knows what a generational talent is.
I'm just curious.
And they're willing to go after them when they come around, and they do not hit the open market very often, and especially in today's modern day baseball. We talk about all the guys that Vladdy was compared to. All of them got locked up, every single one of them, to a team-friendly deal or whatever. Just regardless of whether they're team-friendly or not, they got locked up early in their entry-level contracts. So guys like Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, those guys don't hit the open market very often. So I hope that this deadline goes well, and whoever is at the helm. If Juan Soto hits the open market, we make a serious push.
That's the interesting thing. Does Ross Atkins even get a chance to do that? That's like how
I would say yes. I would say
it all starts with the pitch. It all starts with the pitch because this decision will have to come this trade deadline.
That's what I said.
You can't go after Juan Soto if your payroll is not cut already. So that's
We'll and obviously we won't know. Like the only way we'll even have an indicator that this is possible is if, like Rob said, they shed the contracts that we're talking about, the guys under control next year, George Springer, Kevin Gausman. If they shed those contracts, then it at least bumps his percentage points up a little bit more and bumps our confidence points up a little bit more in terms of expecting something in the offseason. But again, it doesn't matter. Like we won't know if they trust Ross Atkins to make the move regardless of who gets traded at this deadline. But if they do, if he succeeds in the pitch, succeeds at the deadline, then I bet you he has like a month at the beginning of the offseason to try to convince Rogers that he has at least planted a decent seed in the head of Juan Soto at coming to Toronto. Because if he doesn't, exactly. Because if he doesn't, then they will make the move still in that offseason. Like that won't change. He will still get fired in that offseason if that move can't be made, and they will find a new way to spend that money in 2025.
And let's be honest, guys. We're talking about this now. They've probably been talking about this for quite some time.
Oh yeah.
And there's a plan in place.
Yeah.
Now all we have to do is sit back, watch, and see if it's executed properly. And if it is, well, Juan Soto could be a Blue Jay. Oh God, I'm just gonna leave it at that, boys. I'm gonna leave it right there. And by the way, the Jays play the Rays on Tuesday. And that's where we're going to wrap this thing up. Yeah, who cares?
We'll
right? Who the hell cares? We're going from Juan Soto to the 2024 Blue Jays versus the Tampa Bay Rays. Like this. Yeah. We have what, 62 games left, guys? 63 left.
Remember when we said at the beginning of the year that there probably is going to be another 4 AL East teams in the postseason this year, and in reality, it's going to be 2.
Will they win a game though this time around?
Well, we are the dominant division in the regular season, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, not this year.
Oh, well, boys. Well, yeah. I mean, we're not even going to preview the Rays series because, like I said earlier, who the hell cares? But we'll talk to you guys. Probably Thursday. At least we're scheduled to do that. So we'll see what we can do then. So 2 more shows before the trade deadline. Hopefully, there's some more news, maybe some moves to talk about. Hopefully, because for God's sakes, this team on the field doesn't make me want to talk about them much more. But hey, we'll see how it goes, boys. As for myself, Robin Tillemont and Cole Whiston, thank you guys so much for listening, watching, as always. And for Shane, behind the scenes, as always, thank you very much, pal, as always. And go Jays.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Blue Jays Center on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.